gray divorces. We're going to talk a little bit about what a gray divorce is, what it looks like, just give you a brief roadmap. Essentially, what are the consequences and the stakes? Stakes are pretty high in gray divorces usually. And again, you're talking usually about more complex cases where there are a lot of assets. There might be minor children. Some of the times, the children, a lot of times, the children are actually the age of majority, so they have grown up, and the folks are looking at being empty nesters. But things you have to consider are going to be things like retirement and division of the estate. And so those gray divorces can be a little more complex, a little more complicated. That's why it's usually great to have a more seasoned attorney or a seasoned law firm that's going to be helping represent clients that are considering gray divorces or are actually going through a great divorce. That all being said, we're going to jump right in before we get started. I think I did a brief introduction. My name is Genghis Shakhan. I am the managing attorney here at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. This is a boutique law firm, two attorneys, myself, as well as attorney Chelsea Wilkerson. And we essentially cover most of the state of Georgia. Okay. There's two contact numbers that you can reach us at. We have more, but 478 404 We also have numbers for the Savannah as well as the Augusta, those areas as well. We cover those jurisdictions. That being said, I do want to say before we get started at the outset that this is for educational purposes only. Not only that, but you watching this video does not establish an attorney client relationship with yourself and the law firm of Shakhan and Wilkerson Law. Got those disclaimers out the way. Let's go ahead and dive in, guys. So, we're talking divorce, and we're talking more specifically about a gray divorce. And you may be asking yourself, well, what's the difference? And it's pretty simple. A gray divorce usually involves parties that are 50 and older. Okay. And many times, in those cases, of course, there are instances where folks are on a second or third marriage. But in many instances, those 50 plus year olds are looking at having been married sometimes for decades. Okay. And so those divorces, again, usually the stakes are essentially high, are a little different than divorces where we see folks who've been married maybe a few years or under 7 years. And so, the assets, there might, even though there is going to be a division of the marital estate, it is not going to be as robust. The marital estate is not as robust as you would see in some of these gray divorces. Okay. And so I covered already, I did a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to discuss. And so, even though divorce is difficult, at any age, right? They said it's right up there with life events like death and the birth of a child, okay, in terms of just how traumatic or how impactful it can be on our lives. It's said that it's a little more difficult for folks that are 50 and older, okay, especially if they have been married for decades, right? At that point in time, this is a person who you have um, very intimate and close ties with, and you've had it for a very long time. And so, usually in these types of instances, the stakes are fairly high, though they're always high in divorce. They can feel exceedingly high in a gray divorce. All right. And so, usually in gray divorces, you're contemplating things like retirement. You're talking about things like healthcare coverage. Because there might be some concerns regarding continued coverage or Cobra Care. You're talking a lot about finances and the quality of life for decades, right? So if you are terminating a marriage that has 2 or 3 decades in the making and you're already 50 years old or older, then you are closer, a few steps closer to retirement. And so you do want to think, about the long term, what your retirement is going to look like. And so, of course, that retirement might be part of the marital estate and subject to division. And so, as you can see, the stakes become very high because, you want to be mindful of what life is going to look like on the other side of that divorce. Okay. And it's like maybe not, a lot of folks are retiring at 65 or so. Of course, there's talk about pushing the age of retirement up. And so, if you were looking to let's just say you're 50, you're looking to retire in 15 years, or you're 60 looking to retire in just a few years, this is going to be important to you because it can make all the difference of whether or not you're even going to be in position to retire or whether or not you're going to work for the rest of your days, okay, until your back breaks. All right. And so, as you can imagine, the stakes are a little higher than someone that may be getting divorced in their 30s. Okay. And so, this is what a gray divorce looks like, and this is what it all entails. Okay, so we're going to cover a little bit more about what actual gray divorce is, how these cases are different, the risks that are involved, and some of the common mistakes we see when folks are kind of in these gray marriages, gray divorces, and then why bringing an attorney on is going to be really, really important if you are someone that is going through a gray divorce. All right, so a great divorce, as I mentioned, usually the parties are 50 or older, and they've been married for a lot of years and they're nearing retirement, the age of retirement, right? So, or nearing the age of being a senior citizen, right? And so that is what essentially a great divorce is, and that's what makes it different than the other types of divorces that are out there. And so it's simply called grace because it is folks that are divorcing later in life, and they've had a long-term marriage, and that's it, right? There is no secret to why essentially that term is being volleyed around, but they're different, and they're different in a few reasons, all right, a few ways. And so one of those ways is you have at the back end of a great divorce, you have less time to recover financially. All right, so that's important to keep in mind, and that's one of the reasons why the stakes are so high, and that's one of the reasons why in these types of divorces, especially if there are assets, and there's retirement, I am of the opinion that you absolutely should bring an attorney on, that is going to make certain that you can maximize your payout, right, or protect your assets, simply because you don't have the time to be in market when it comes to making investments, when it comes to perhaps pursuing some other streams of income or revenue. And so you have to, the things that are already on the table, the things that are already subject to equitable division, you have to maximize your piece of the pie. And so that is one of the reasons why having a counsel, aggressive counsel, is going to be really, really, really important. Okay. And so a 30-year-old might have 30-year-old, 40-year-old might have decades to rebuild after a divorce, and to basically rebuild that wealth. You may not have that, okay, as a 60-year-old, right, a 59-year-old, or a 70-year-old. That you might be on the other side of that. So again, the stakes are super high. So one mistake in these great divorces can have very serious consequences for you. All right. So you only get one opportunity usually at this, one bite at the apple. And, obviously, when you have to do that cost benefit analysis of whether or not you want to bring on counsel, bring on an attorney, there's a cost associated with that as well. So you want to have a law firm, you do want to have an attorney that's going to make certain that this stuff is done right the first time. Okay. And I can't emphasize that enough because we get a lot of clients that are coming to us from other law firms. And so I want to, it's important that you do your homework on the front end. Okay. And not only that, the ways that you can do research, you can read reviews, you can go through the consultations. And as my mother would tell me, you get what you pay for. Okay, so some things you don't want to cut corners on, and so you go with someone because they're cheap. Walmart is cheap, right? And so if I want my brakes repaired, and this is no knock at Walmart, I'm not going to Walmart, right? I want someone that is reputable, and someone that has essentially a track record of success, and professionalism, and I can they can make a guarantee that me and my family are going to be safe. Okay, and so it's the same thing when it comes to legal representation. And again, that's not a knock to the Walton family, or to Walmart. I shop at Walmart routinely, but I did want to let it be known that there is a quality, right? There are levels of quality, and so you do want to keep that in mind when it comes to bringing on the right representation. All right, and I won't do a deep dive into that. That'll be another video about how to probably hire a law firm, what to look for, how to vet a law firm, and to bring on counsel that is going to represent your interests. But they're going to be professional. They're going to advocate for you zealously. And they're going to be accessible as well. All right. And so all of that stuff is important. That all goes into the recipe when it comes to deciding on who to go forward with. All right, and so that's why again, make sure you get on the horn with these people, talk to them, and listen to their spiel before pulling the trigger and making your final decision. All right, so you only get one opportunity to divide these assets. That's going to include retirement accounts, pensions, real estate, and investment. So you don't the margin for error is super slim, right? And so you want to make sure it's done correctly, and obviously that's going to come down to your counsel, right? So here are some of the biggest mistakes that we see that are made in these great divorces. One is going to be messing around with that retirement account, okay? And so often the largest asset in a divorce is the retirement, all right? And so 401s, IRAs, pensions, military retirement, or deferred compensation. This is all stuff that is going to be used for retirement. All right. And so it's important that it's divided up quickly, it's divided up appropriately. All right. And so one of the key questions, usually in these great divorces, is how those assets are going to be divided. Obviously, if it's a military divorce, that looks a little different than if it's just a civilian divorce. Okay. If it's a divorce that might, maybe the parties were married less than 2 years, that's going to look different than someone who's been married over 20 years. Or if there's a divorce that takes place and the parties don't have any retirement, okay, that's going to look different where, people are vested, they're actually already retired, and they have a couple $1 million sitting in their retirement account. That's going to look different, okay? So these cases are going to be different. They're going to be evaluated differently, and so they're going to need to be worked differently. And again, that's going to be up to your counsel to make certain that they are working your case as it's supposed to be worked. All right. The marital home is really big, right? And so in these great divorces, it's hard to get started again, right? You might have, we have encountered great divorces where the parties have already paid off the residence, right? The marital residence. They had a 30-year mortgage and it was paid off. Okay. Or there might be a reverse mortgage on the home. Or someone doesn't know where they're going to live post divorce, right? So you were perhaps not the primary breadwinner. The house was purchased over the course of the marriage. One party is still making money, one is not. And that person that's not has very real concerns about where they are going to reside post divorce. Okay. If the house is going to be sold, if someone's going to remain in the house, right? If the house has to be refinanced to get someone's name off of the house, right? All of this, as you can see, is can make your divorce quite complex, and this is one of the reasons why attorneys are brought in to help get these things addressed. So, who's keeping the house? Who's selling the house? Or if the house is going to be sold, I should say, and can either spouse afford it? So, let's say the house is going to be sold. The house was only worth because maybe there's a mortgage. After the mortgage is paid and the bills associated with the sale of the property are paid, maybe there is, 40,000, $30,000 left. Maybe that's not enough to purchase a new house, right? So maybe your standard of living is about to change. Someone may go into an apartment. Both of you may go into an apartment. Someone may want to go into a assisted senior living facility. All right. And so, there are costs associated with that, right? And this is again why it's important that you really take seriously the division of the marital estate because, of not just retirement, what it's going to look like, but your living arrangements in that situation. So, if keeping the home is no longer financially practical, then that's something that's going to have to be discussed. Something that's going to have to be discussed and addressed over the course of the divorce in these great divorces. And even things like alimony, which is going to be important. So, again, the scenario in which someone is working, someone is not, long-term alimony or spousal support might be on the menu. Okay. And in that situation, you're going to want to have someone there that is going to advocate for you, especially if you've been married for decades, to continue to receive some form of financial support, especially if you're not the cause or the demise of the relationship. Okay, if someone was cheating, or there's acts of infidelity, and again, there's been a pattern of it or a pattern of abuse, you may be entitled to some form of spousal support or alimony, especially considering your contributions to the marriage. And maybe you were a homemaker, right? Or maybe you essentially homeschooled the children and gave your spouse the opportunity to go out there and make money because you were the one holding it down at the home front. All of that needs to be taken into consideration when we start talking about long-term compensation post divorce, right? Because you didn't pay into a retirement, whereas perhaps your spouse did. All right. You didn't necessarily pay the mortgage, but again, you didn't need to have any kind of child care. The kids didn't have to go to private school because of what you were doing in terms of homeschooling, right? Or you might have done a number of improvements around the house. Maybe you were handy, and you replaced floors. You painted walls. Okay, you hung drywall. All of this stuff is going to be taken into consideration, and more the all the more reason why counsel in these types of cases, these great divorces, can be really, really important. Okay, and so the reality is that sometimes one spouse has been in the workforce for years, and maybe one spouse not so much, or there just might be these disparities in income, all of which have to be taken into consideration in these great divorces, because you are so near retirement and you are handicapped or hamstrung when it comes to paying into a retirement because one spouse was making more money, again because of time maybe in the workforce. Then of course there are healthcare issues and concerns. So healthcare can become increasingly important later in life, and so health insurance is one of those things that probably are on the table and needs to be discussed. Medicare eligibility, and then long-term care concerns. Okay, so maybe you are diabetic, maybe you've developed some form of cancer, and you're undergoing some treatment. All right, or maybe again you're going to need some kind of assisted living accommodations. All of these things are going to have essentially financial consequences. And so it's going to be important if you're in a great divorce that you think about how it's going to be addressed in terms of resources, because you're going to need to do a resource grab, right? So that you are protected for the decades following divorce, right? So, again, just depends on when your divorce takes place. But again, you might be near the age of retirement. You may have retired. All right. But you have to think about realistically, again, what is going to be available to you in terms of assets from the marital estate. Okay. And then there are things like estate planning, which, kind of always overlooked: wills, trusts, beneficiary designations, power of attorney, all that stuff as well. And divorce can impact all of those. All right. And so I talked a lot about the stakes, and a little bit about why the stakes are much higher in these situations. And you just want to reiterate again, you are protecting assets like retirement that are going to probably be the biggest asset in the divorce when it comes to these great divorces. And that is future income we're talking about, right? And so when we're talking future income, if you are again 59 years old, you're 60 years old, you're a few years from retirement, even if you are going to retire, then that income might be essential again to maintaining your current standard of living. All right. So very, very important stuff when it comes to protecting your future and future income. retirement timing, your lifestyle, and as well as housing and healthcare are all going to be impacted in these gray divorces. So again, I talked about the margin for error being very, very slim. You don't have 20 years to recover from a bad settlement. And that's, I can't really emphasize that enough. You just don't have the time to recover or to, time in the market or time to look for a new stream of income or revenue at perhaps 60 years old. So this is your shot. You need to bring on a heavy hitter. Okay. I can't emphasize that enough. You need to bring out the big dogs, the big guns. Okay. And so that's why it's important more than in any other type of divorce for you to bring on the right counsel. Okay. And so you got to do your homework. Please vet the people that you hire and that you retain. Please do not cut corners. You hear horror stories and you're always like, man, I wish you had gave us a call first. Okay. We would have been able to help you out. All right. So some of the common causes of gray divorces, I'm gonna transition, are going to be just you become empty nesters. You've been parents your entire lives. That is part of who your identity was. Your children have left the coop, and now you are, or left the nest, and now you're empty nesters. You're just two seniors that are staring at each other on a daily basis, and it just takes a toll on the relationship. Okay. You have different retirement goals or financial stress, infidelity, or you're just growing apart, right? Or it's, a second marriage. All of those things can contribute to gray divorces and all things that do contribute. Now, biggest mistakes that we generally will see people make in these gray divorces is they're letting their emotions control their decisions. Sometimes you think, oh, I've been with this person for a decade, I want to continue to care for them. Whereas me, you should be thinking about, number one, right? You better be thinking about number one because that person might move on romantically in a couple of years. And then for all of your chivalry, and for all of your goodwill, you could be the one left out on the code in the code. Okay. So you have to, and that's the reason you bring on an attorney, because usually that attorney is a dispassionate third party and can say, listen, this is what we do for our clients at least. Listen, you feel this way today, but 2 years from now, you may not feel that way, right? You may have buyer's remorse about this settlement agreement that we're entering into. And so we have to advise you that this is a bad idea. Okay. And so those are conversations, those are tough conversations that we do have with our clients, and we have them often. We're very transparent. That's what you hired us for, right? To give you good counsel. And so we're going to do that. All right. So letting emotions control decisions, it's okay. It's an emotional time. We certainly understand, but we want to make sure that we're making sound decisions that are going to protect you. You hired us to protect you. That's what we're going to do. Ignoring tax consequences, that's obvious. I won't do a deep dive to that. Focusing on the house only. So sometimes people were like, well, you know what? We really need to address what's going on with the house. Yeah, that's one thing. You may also need to address what's going on with the debt, right? So you guys might have a mountain of debt, and who's going to take care of that debt? You may also want to talk about that retirement. The retirement may have more money in it than the house. We've seen multi-million dollar retirements. The house might be worth $200,000, right? So you want to address a lot of stuff, especially in these complex cases that involve gray divorces. Overlooking retirement accounts or rushing into a settlement. We see a lot of folks rush into a settlement. Typically, what we hear is, I just want to get it over. I just want it to be done. I'm just ready to move on. I'm ready to turn the page. And that is all fine and dandy. But, if you are leaving something on the table, if it is done incorrectly, and then you may feel very differently. Sometimes, as soon as the gavel, hits the bench, people realize and understand that they entered into bad agreements. We get clients all the time, or folks, sometimes we can't help people, and we'll let them know, this is a terrible agreement. But We can't assist you at this stage of the game, right? Or if we do assist you, it's going to cost you, triple what it would have costed, just doing this divorce correctly. All right. And so it's kind of like when you take your car into a bad mechanic and they do something that, is going to put your car in mechanical disarray, and you have to go to another mechanic to get it fixed, right? And so they have to undo the work of the previous mechanic and then do it correctly. So it's going to probably cost you double, all right? Or triple if you had taken it to the proper mechanic from the beginning. So something to think about when it comes to these great divorces. All right. So high asset great divorces, and many of them are high asset simply because, I mean, over the years, you've made sound and wise investments. You have contributed up to that 32,000 plus of retirement on a yearly basis. You've maxed it out. You might have had contributions from your job. You just might have been really, really smart with money. And so, your marital estate, it looks great. Maybe you've paid your mortgage down or paid the house off. Maybe you have, other boats and other investment properties, cryptocurrency, whatever. Maybe you have other businesses, right? So all of that stuff is going to come in those high asset grade divorces, and those are going to be additional concerns. Maybe you have a business, maybe you have another, multiple businesses. All of that stuff is more reason why, especially if your spouse has a business. There is no reason why. I'm gonna say this to you. If your spouse has a thriving business, you absolutely need an attorney. You should not be thinking pro se. There is nothing about that situation that warrants you trying to basically initiate that action alone, all right? Because there's too much at stake. There's a lot of assets at play. And so you do want to definitely make sure that, of course, if you know your marital estate is big and robust, you need to be finding the best attorney possible. Okay. And so you do need to do your homework. All right. And so a lot of times those types of cases require additional financial analysis. And so in many of those cases, we will bring on things like forensic accountants, or private investigators, or skip tracers, whatever, to track, track the money. And so sometimes those are really big cases, and we have a number of those types of cases where we do have to call on other financial experts, so we can make a strong case for our client to walk away with everything that they are entitled to. That's important. We want you to get everything that you're entitled to. Leave nothing on the table. All right. So second marriage considerations. Questions might involve separate property, inheritances, adult children, and blended families, right? So that is for folks who are going through a great divorce, but they're going through a second or a third marriage, and basically now are going into contemplating divorce. And so those are things that we often have to think about, can make your case even more complex than perhaps someone that has only been married one time. All right. So the right law firm matters as we kind of bring things to a close. I've said that. I'm re-emphasizing it to you. You want to make sure you bring on the right law firm, the right legal team. Great, because the great divorce is different. It's more complex. It can be a high conflict, and that's something that of course, we have a lot of experience with. We are in court on pretty much on a weekly basis. We're arguing criminal cases. We're arguing high conflict divorce and custody cases. So you want someone with the experience, right? Someone that is used to standing before juries, someone that is used to standing before judges, and then basically someone that is familiar with the jurisdiction that you're in. Very important as well, right? And so someone that does the homework, they're professional, they're accessible. And so if you noted, I'm hitting on all of those areas where we pride ourselves in the work, right? And so we pride ourselves in being accessible, professional, right? And transparent. So not every divorce attorney regularly handles retirement assets or division of the marital estate or high asset cases, right? Or long term spousal support or alimony cases. So experience matters. And hopefully there's a recurring thing that you're beginning to pick up on. Experience matters. Okay. And there's a cost associated with experience, there's a cost associated with quality. Okay. And so you have to keep that in mind as well, when it comes to quality representation. So the attorney should be good at asset identification, financial discovery, retirement, division of that retirement estate, division of the marital estate or any property, and then of course trial preparation. Okay, so if your counsel is not good at that, that's no bueno. Okay, for you, okay? Because again, you want to make sure you get the return on your investment. And because small mistakes can become big mistakes when it comes to the retirement, for example. You again, the margin of error, if you are in a gray divorce, is super slim, it's minuscule, okay? And so you do not have the time to recover many times financially from bad mistakes or bad judgment. So we want to keep in mind that a poorly negotiated settlement is going to affect your retirement income, your health care, your housing, as well as your financial security. All right. So if you're thinking about hiring an attorney, here are some questions that you do want to ask. You want to ask, hey, have you guys handled great divorces before? Right? Do you have experience with that? Have you handled high asset cases before? Do you have experience with that? Um, uh, do you know how to divide retirement up? And what if there are disputes regarding spousal support or alimony? What about settlement, or do you litigate a lot? Right? Are you in court often? We would answer in the affirmative to all of that, but not everyone does. Okay, and so that should help you. I'm giving you a lot of nuggets. And a lot of pointers if you are out there in the market for an attorney on questions to ask and how to vet a good attorney. Okay. All right. So as we begin to wrap things up, great divorce is not the end of your marriage, but you do want to make sure that, well, it is the end of your marriage, but it's not the end of your life. You do want to make sure that you are prepared for life post divorce. And some of that is going to be being prepared in terms of resources and resource rich, maintaining your lifestyle, understanding about where you're going to be living and residing. In addition to that, you're going to want to make sure that again, anything that is potentially out there that has your name on it, that you get access to. Okay, so if you are 50 or older and you've been married for some time, you're going through a great divorce. You have a lot of assets. You have what's called a complex case. We can help you out. That's the good news. Okay, you're welcome to give us a call at 478-845-1213 or 404-999-9529. You can find our information if you want to schedule a consultation in the link in our bio. Go to our website, check out our blogs. We talk about great divorces quite a bit. We talk about division of marital estates, but we'd be more than happy to help you out. Okay, guys? All right. Thank you for joining us. If this has been helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. If you know someone going through a great divorce, a family or friend, you need to go ahead and share this video with them. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you encourage others to follow us. We have a lot of long form content about everything essentially involving divorce, child custody, men's rights, as well as criminal defense. Okay, so make sure you follow us. All these other videos, make sure you go through and make sure you watch the videos that apply to your case, and then make sure you give us a call if you're looking to retain counsel, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. Matter of fact, it would be an honor to help you out. Okay, guys, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next video.